For centuries, aliens failed to decipher it. Then a human spoke the forgotten tongue. For centuries, alien scholars searched for meaning in a language no one could speak. Entire civilizations studied it only to fail. But the day a human veteran walked into the archive, he opened his mouth, and the impossible came alive. The Discovery, the cargo vessel Horizon's Edge, drifted through the asteroid field surrounding Kepler-7, its hull scarred from decades of hauling minerals between the outer colonies. Captain Marcus Rivera stood on the bridge, watching the navigation display with tired eyes. At 53, he'd spent more years in space than on Earth, and it showed in the permanent squint he'd developed from staring at screens in the artificial light of spacecraft. "Captain, we're getting an unusual reading from the surface," announced Lieutenant Torres, the ship's communications officer. She was young, maybe 25, fresh out of the academy and still excited about the mundane discoveries that space travel occasionally offered. Marcus walked over to her station, his magnetic boots clicking against the metal floor. The mining colony below them was supposed to be routine. Pick up processed titanium, deliver food supplies, move on to the next stop. But Torres's screen showed something different, an energy signature pulsing from the northern continent, far from the mining operations. "Probably just a malfunctioning beacon," Marcus said, though something about the pattern caught his attention. The pulses weren't random. They had rhythm, structure like a heartbeat or maybe something more deliberate. "Sir, the colony administrator is requesting we investigate," Torres continued. "Apparently this signal started 3 days ago when they were excavating a new site. They found something buried in the rock. Something old." Marcus sighed. He wasn't an archaeologist or a scientist. He was just a cargo hauler who'd done his 20 years in Earth's military before choosing the quiet life of commercial shipping. But the colony's request was formal, and refusing would mean paperwork he didn't want to deal with. "Fine. Prep a shuttle. Torres, you're with me. Chan, take the con." He grabbed his jacket, the one with his old service patches still attached. He never knew why he kept wearing it. Maybe it was nostalgia. Or maybe it was because after all these years, he still felt more like a soldier than a merchant. The descent to Kepler-7 was smooth, the planet's thin atmosphere offering little resistance. The mining colony sprawled across the red desert like a metal infection, all pipes and processing plants. But their destination was different. A excavation site 20 kilometers north where the miners had stopped working and scientists had started gathering. Administrator Reeves met them at the landing pad. She was a tall woman with premature gray hair, the kind that came from managing a colony on the edge of nowhere. "Captain Rivera, thank you for coming. We've had xenoarchaeologists from 3 different species here for 2 days, and none of them can make sense of what we found." She led them through a maze of temporary structures to the dig site. The excavation had revealed a structure that clearly didn't belong. While the planet's rock was red and rough, this building was made of a smooth, dark material that seemed to absorb light. It was perfectly preserved, as if it had been built yesterday rather than buried for millennia. Inside the structure, Marcus found himself in a circular chamber filled with alien researchers. A tall, thin Zalari with blue skin was running scanner over the walls. 2 Vorthon scientists argued in their clicking language near what looked like a control panel. And in the center of it all, covering every surface, were symbols. They weren't carved or painted. They seemed to be part of the material itself, glowing faintly with an inner light. The patterns repeated in sequences, short flashes, long pulses, spaces between them creating a complex rhythm. Marcus found himself unconsciously tapping his finger against his leg, following the pattern. "Magnificent, isn't it?" said a voice beside him. Marcus turned to find a Korthax academic, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "We've found similar sites on 7 other worlds, all with these same symbols. The Galactic Archaeological Council has been studying them for over 300 years, but we've never been able to determine their meaning." Marcus walked closer to the wall, studying the patterns. Something about them was familiar, nagging at the back of his mind like a half-remembered dream. The short and long pulses, the specific timing between them. He'd seen this before or something like it. "Have you tried treating it as a form of communication?" Marcus asked. The Korthax made a sound that might have been laughter. "Of course. We've run it through every known linguistic database, compared it to mathematical sequences, stellar positions, even musical notations. The patterns are clearly intentional, but their meaning remains elusive." Marcus pulled out his personal tablet, started recording the patterns. As he watched them repeat, that familiar feeling grew stronger. During his military service, he'd specialized in tactical communications, learning dozens of ways to send messages in hostile conditions. Radio, laser, quantum entanglement, and even older methods that most people had forgotten. "Captain, we should return to the ship," Torres said. "We're scheduled to depart in 3 hours." But Marcus wasn't listening. He was counting the pulses, measuring the spaces between them. Short, short, long, short, long, short, short, pause, short, short, short. His heart started racing. It couldn't be that simple. These were alien ruins, ancient beyond measure. But the pattern was unmistakable once you knew what to look for. He'd learned it in basic training, a backup communication method that every Earth soldier memorized even though they'd probably never use it. "This is Morse code," he said quietly. The room fell silent. Every researcher stopped what they were doing and turned to stare at him. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" the Korthax asked. "Morse code," Marcus repeated, louder this time. "It's an ancient Earth communication system. These symbols, they're using Morse code." The Zalari scientist approached, her scanner forgotten. "That's impossible. These sites predate human space travel by thousands of years. How could they contain an Earth language?" Marcus was already translating, his finger tracing the patterns on the wall. He paused, his blood running cold. "It's a distress signal. The universal Earth code for help." The implications hung in the air like a charged field. If Marcus was right, it meant either humans had somehow visited these sites long before their recorded history, or something else entirely was at play. Either way, the message was clear. Someone somewhere had been calling for help for a very long time. Administrator Reeves was the first to break the silence. "Can you translate the rest?" Marcus nodded, already working through the sequences. "Give me some time. If this really is Morse code, then there's more here than just a distress signal. There's a full message." He started from the beginning, carefully documenting each pulse. As the letters formed words and the words formed sentences, a story began to emerge. It was a warning, a detailed account of something that had happened long ago. But what disturbed Marcus most wasn't the message itself. It was the signature at the end. "Commander Marcus Rivera, Earth Defense Force, serial number 7789 Delta." His own name, his own serial number, from a message thousands of years old. Torres looked at him with wide eyes. "Captain, how is that possible?" Marcus stared at the wall, his mind racing through possibilities, each more impossible than the last. "I don't know, but we need to contact the Galactic Council immediately, and I need to translate the rest of this message." The translation. The conference room aboard the Galactic Council's research station was packed beyond capacity. Representatives from 14 different species had gathered, drawn by the impossible claim that a human cargo captain had decoded messages that had puzzled the galaxy's greatest minds for centuries. Marcus stood at the center, feeling very much like a specimen under observation. Council Director Athex, a serpentine Rillan whose scales shifted color with emotion, currently displayed a skeptical purple. "Captain Rivera, you claim these ancient symbols are written in a human code. Please explain how this is possible when the sites are confirmed to be over 10,000 years old." Marcus had spent the last 72 hours asking himself the same question. He'd translated messages from 4 different sites, and each one had revealed more impossible details. Military protocols he recognized, technical specifications that matched current Earth technology, and most disturbing of all, references to events that hadn't happened yet. "I can't explain the temporal paradox," Marcus admitted, "but I can prove the translation is accurate." The code follows the exact structure of International Morse, standardized on Earth in 1865. Every message maintains perfect syntax and uses Earth military terminology. He activated the holographic display, showing the translated text from the Kepler-7 site. This message describes a containment protocol for something called a dimensional breach. It includes coordinates, timing sequences, and a warning about entities that exist outside normal space-time. A Vorthan scientist clicked rapidly in agitation. "This is absurd. You're asking us to believe that humans somehow sent messages back in time, that your primitive species, which only achieved faster than light travel 40 years ago, created these installations?" "I'm not asking you to believe anything," Marcus replied steadily. "I'm just translating what's there. But consider this. Every site we've found is located near a dimensional weak point. Places where the barrier between our reality and others is thinner. That's not coincidence. Dr. Yarix, a crystalline shimmerer whose body reflected light in complex patterns, floated forward. I've analyzed Captain Rivera's translations independently. The mathematical consistency is remarkable. If this is a hoax, it's an impossibly elaborate one. It's not a hoax, Marcus said. He pulled up another translation, this one from a site discovered on Proxima 3. This message is dated using Earth's calendar, December 15th, 2387. That's 300 years in our future. The room erupted in discussion, dozens of voices in different languages creating a chaos of sound. Director Athex raised the appendage for silence, her scales now shifting to a thoughtful green. "Show us your translation process," she commanded. "Let our linguists verify each step." Marcus nodded and began demonstrating. He showed them how each short pulse represented a dot, each long pulse a dash, how combinations created letters, how letters formed words. It was simple, almost primitive compared to the complex quantum communications the Council used. But that simplicity made it nearly impossible to fake. As he worked through the translation, something caught his attention, a section he hadn't fully decoded yet, thinking it was corrupted. But now, with fresh eyes and the pressure of scrutiny, he saw the pattern. It wasn't corrupted. It was encrypted using an old Earth military cipher he'd learned during special operations training. His hands hesitated over the controls. This was beyond classified. It was impossible. The cipher had been created specifically for his unit, designed by his commanding officer who died 15 years ago. "No one else knew it, Captain?" Dr. Yarix prompted. "Is something wrong?" Marcus made a decision. "There's an encrypted section. I'll need privacy to decode it. It uses military protocols that I'm not authorized to share even now." "Unacceptable," the Vorthan scientist clicked. "All information must be shared with the Council." "Then it stays encrypted," Marcus said firmly. His military training was kicking in now, the old instincts about operational security that 20 years of civilian life hadn't erased. Director Athex studied him, her ancient eyes seeming to peer into his thoughts. "Decrypt it. Show only me. If I deem it necessary, we'll share with the full Council." Marcus nodded and led the director to a secured terminal. His fingers moved across the interface, applying the cipher that only a handful of people had ever known. As the message revealed itself, he felt his world tilt off its axis. "Marcus," the message began, "if you're reading this, then the timeline is proceeding as calculated. I know this is confusing. I'm you, or rather, I will be you 300 years from now. The dimensional breach that's about to occur can't be prevented, only managed. The installations we've placed throughout time are containment systems. You need to activate them in sequence using the authorization codes from Operation Nightfall." Marcus's hands were shaking. Operation Nightfall had been classified beyond top secret. His unit had been tasked with preventing a terrorist attack using an experimental quantum weapon. They'd succeeded, but the details had been buried so deep that officially it had never happened. The message continued. "The enemy we're fighting doesn't exist in normal time. They experience all moments simultaneously. The only way to defeat them was to fight them across all of time at once. These installations are our defensive line, but they need an operator who exists at the right temporal junction. That's you, the original you. Before the war that's coming." Director Athex had gone completely still, her scales now a color Marcus had never seen before, pure white. "This message, it knows things about you that no one could know." "Yeah," Marcus agreed, his voice hoarse. "Things I've never told anyone. Things that were erased from official records." "Then we must consider the possibility," the director said slowly, "that these messages are genuine, that humanity's future is somehow warning us about a threat that transcends normal understanding of time." Marcus pulled up the rest of the encrypted data. There were technical specifications, scientific principles that Earth wouldn't discover for centuries, and most importantly, a countdown. According to the message, they had less than 30 days before the first dimensional breach would occur. "We need to go to these coordinates," Marcus said, pointing to a location in uncharted space. "The message says there's an installation there, fully operational but dormant. It needs to be activated before the breach occurs." "Captain Rivera," the director said formally, "I'm granting you emergency authority to lead an expedition. Choose your team. Take whatever resources you need. If this message is accurate, we're about to face something beyond our current understanding. As Marcus left to prepare, he couldn't shake the feeling that his entire life had been leading to this moment. Every decision, every seemingly random event that had brought him to that mining colony at exactly the right time to see those symbols. It was as if he'd been maneuvered into position by someone who knew exactly what would happen, someone who might have been himself. The truth unveiled. The expedition ship Temporal Guardian dropped out of hyperspace at the coordinates specified in the message. Marcus stood on the bridge surrounded by the most unlikely crew ever assembled. Scientists from 7 different species, Earth military advisors pulled from retirement, and a handful of cargo haulers from his old crew who'd volunteered because they trusted him more than they understood the mission. Lieutenant Torres was at the sensor station, her face pale with exhaustion. She'd barely slept since they'd left, obsessing over the data. "Captain, I'm detecting a massive structure at the coordinates. It's impossible." On the view screen, the installation materialized out of the darkness. It was a sphere, perfectly smooth, the size of a small moon. But what made it impossible was that their sensors showed it existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Parts of it were there and not there, phasing in and out of their reality like a bad hologram. "It's beautiful," whispered Dr. Yarix, her crystalline form resonating with the structure's energy signature. "It's a fortress," corrected Commander Liu, the Earth military advisor who'd been Marcus's superior officer 20 years ago. She'd come out of retirement when she'd heard about the mission, bringing with her knowledge of black projects that officially didn't exist. "Look at the defensive geometries. This thing was built to withstand assault from multiple dimensional vectors simultaneously." Marcus felt drawn to the structure in a way he couldn't explain. It was like looking at something he'd forgotten he knew, a memory just out of reach. "Take us in, slowly." As they approached, the sphere began to react. Lights appeared along its surface, pulsing in that familiar Morse pattern. But now Marcus could read it instantly. "Welcome, Commander Rivera. We've been waiting." The docking was automatic. The sphere's systems took control of their ship with a gentle but irresistible force, guiding them to a port that materialized just for them. When the airlock sealed and the pressure equalized, Marcus found himself looking at a corridor that was unmistakably human in design. Earth military standard down to the color coding on the pipes. "This doesn't make sense," Commander Liu said. "This looks like it was built using our current specifications. But if the dating is right, it's older than human civilization." Marcus led the team through the corridors, following illuminated guides that activated at their approach. They passed through sections that looked like barracks, command centers, even what appeared to be a mess hall with tables sized for humans. Everything was pristine, maintained by systems that had functioned for millennia. They reached a massive chamber at the sphere's heart. The room was dominated by a central platform surrounded by holographic projectors. The moment Marcus stepped onto the platform, they activated. The figure that appeared was human, wearing a uniform Marcus didn't recognize but somehow knew was Earth military. The man looked older, weathered by experiences that had aged him beyond his years. But the face was unmistakable. It was Marcus. Older, scarred, but definitely him. "Hello," the hologram said. "I know this is disorienting. I remember standing exactly where you are, feeling exactly what you're feeling. The confusion, the impossibility of it all. But I need you to listen because we don't have much time." The elder Marcus walked forward, his image so realistic it was hard to believe he wasn't really there. "In the year 2384, Earth makes a discovery. We find a way to punch through dimensional barriers, to access parallel realities. It seems like the ultimate scientific achievement. But we don't realize that by opening that door we also let something in." The hologram waved his hand and the room filled with images. Creatures that hurt to look at. Beings of impossible geometry that existed in too many dimensions at once. They flowed through breached barriers like water through a broken dam, consuming everything they touched. "We call them the Devourers," the elder Marcus continued. "They don't see time like we do. For them, past, present, and future are all happening simultaneously. When they invaded our time, they invaded all times. The war we fought, it wasn't just in our era. It was across all of history." Dr. Yarix's form flickered with distress. "This is beyond theoretical physics. Beings that exist outside temporal constraints would be effectively omnipotent." "Not omnipotent," the hologram corrected, "just differently potent. We found their weakness. They can only manifest where dimensional barriers are weak, and they need anchor points in normal spacetime. That's what these installations are, not fortresses but locks. They seal the weak points and prevent the devourers from entering our reality. But if they exist across all time, Commander Liu said, how did you defeat them? The elder Marcus smiled grimly. We didn't defeat them. We contained them. Using technology we developed by studying their own dimensional manipulation, we created these installations and sent them back through time. Way back, to points before human civilization, even before Earth itself formed. We created a temporal paradox. The installations exist because we built them in the future, but we could only build them because they existed in the past. Marcus felt his head spinning. So these installations, they're already here, already functioning? Yes and no, his future self replied. They exist, but they're dormant. They need to be activated at specific temporal junction points, moments when the timeline is particularly vulnerable. You're at one of those points now. In 26 days, a research team on Europa will conduct an experiment that accidentally weakens the dimensional barrier. If the installation isn't active when that happens, the devourers will break through. Then we stop the experiment, Marcus said immediately. The hologram shook its head. You can't, it's a fixed point. If it doesn't happen, the timeline collapses and the paradox that keeps the installations in place unravels. The experiment must happen. The breach must occur. But the installation must be active to contain it. Marcus walked to one of the control panels, recognizing systems that seemed both ancient and advanced. How do I activate it? Place your hand on the central console and speak your authorization code from Operation Nightfall. Marcus hesitated. That operation was so classified that even thinking about it felt like betrayal. But he moved to the console, placed his hand on the smooth surface, and spoke the words he'd sworn never to say again. Authorization, Nightfall Prime, Rivera Marcus. Temporal cessation protocol active. The installation came alive. Energy coursed through systems that had waited millennia for this moment. The sphere began to pulse with power that Marcus could feel in his bones. Throughout the chamber, displays showed other installations across the galaxy, beginning to respond, creating a network of protection that spanned light years. It's working, Torres reported, her instruments going wild. The dimensional barriers around all the weak points are strengthening. The hologram of Elder Marcus nodded. The first step is complete, but this is just the beginning. The installations need constant monitoring, adjustment, and sometimes direct intervention. You need to create an organization, a group that transcends species boundaries. Call it the Temporal Defense Initiative or whatever you want. But it needs to exist and it needs to be ready. Ready for what? Marcus asked. For the war that's already being fought in times you haven't reached yet. You're not just activating defenses, Marcus. You're recruiting for a war that exists outside normal time. Every species, every civilization that's advanced enough to understand the threat needs to be part of this. The weight of it all pressed down on Marcus. He was a cargo hauler, a retired soldier who'd wanted nothing more than a quiet life among the stars. Now he was being asked to be the architect of a galactic defense force against an enemy that didn't even properly exist yet. Why me? He asked his future self. Why is it always me in these messages? The elder Marcus's expression softened. Because you're the paradox point. The one person who exists at the right time, with the right knowledge in the right place. Every timeline where humanity survives has you in this position. It's not fate or destiny. Its probability collapsed into certainty by the structure of the paradox itself. Before Marcus could respond, alarms began blaring. Torres's voice cut through the noise. Captain, something's happening on Europa. The experiment. It's starting early. The Guardian's choice. The installation's command center erupted into controlled chaos. Holographic displays showed the Europa research station in real time, despite being light years away. The dimensional monitoring systems that future humanity had built into the installation were tracking a growing instability in the fabric of space-time itself. They're 17 days early, Lieutenant Torres reported, her fingers flying across interfaces that she somehow understood despite never seeing them before. The research team accelerated their timeline. Marcus watched the data streams, seeing patterns that his military training helped him recognize. It was like watching enemy movements on a battlefield, except the battlefield existed in dimensions that human minds weren't meant to comprehend. Can we warn them? Commander Liu asked. No, Dr. Yarix answered, her crystalline form pulsing with agitation. Any communication would create a causal loop. They have to proceed unknowing or the timeline fractures. The hologram of Elder Marcus stepped forward. This is why you're here now. The timeline is fluid in small ways, but fixed in large ones. You need to make a choice. Activate the full defensive grid now, risking exposure of the installations to the Galactic Council before they're ready to accept the truth, or wait and try to contain the breach locally. Marcus studied the readings. The dimensional weakness around Europa was growing exponentially. In minutes, it would reach critical threshold. If something came through, when something came through, it would have a foothold in their reality. Show me what we're dealing with, he ordered. The displays shifted, showing predictive models of what would emerge. The images were wrong in every way that mattered. Creatures that existed in too many dimensions at once. Beings that consumed not just matter but the possibility of matter. They were hunger given form, entropy with intent. If even one of those things gets through. Torres didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Marcus made his decision. Activate everything. Full defensive grid. All installations, maximum power. Captain, one of the alien scientists interjected. The energy signature will be detected by every advanced civilization in the galaxy. There will be questions we cannot answer. Then we answer them with the truth, Marcus replied. He turned to the hologram of his future self. That's why you made it obvious, isn't it? The Morse code, the human military protocols. You wanted it to be undeniable that humans were involved, so the galaxy would have to listen. The elder Marcus nodded. The hardest part isn't fighting the devourers. It's convincing 1,000 different species to work together, to trust each other with technology that could destroy them all. But if humanity is at the center of it, if we're the ones taking the risk, it changes the political dynamics. Marcus placed both hands on the control interface. Around him, his mixed species crew watched with a combination of fear and determination. These were beings who'd come on this mission out of scientific curiosity or personal loyalty. Now they were about to become the first line of defense in a war that transcended their understanding. Do it, Commander Liu said quietly. She'd moved to stand beside him, her presence a reminder of all the impossible missions they'd survived together. If there's even a chance this is real, we have to act. Marcus nodded and initiated the activation sequence. The installation's power core, dormant for millennia, roared to life. Energy that had been carefully contained and preserved flooded through systems designed by humans who wouldn't be born for centuries. Across the galaxy, 17 other installations responded, creating a network of protection that had been waiting for this exact moment. The effect was immediate. The dimensional breach forming around Europa hit the defensive grid like water hitting a wall. The readings showed the devourers pressing against the barrier, testing it, trying to find weakness. But the grid held. It's working, Dr. Yarix announced, her voice filled with wonder. The dimensional integrity is stabilizing. But Marcus could see what others might miss. The energy required was enormous. The installations were burning through power reserves that had taken millennia to accumulate. They could maintain this level of defense for days, maybe weeks, but not indefinitely. We need to contact the Council, he said. Full disclosure. Show them everything. Captain, Torres interrupted. We're receiving signals. Hundreds of them. Every major civilization in the galaxy is demanding to know what just happened. Marcus turned to the communications array. This was the moment that would define humanity's place in the galactic community. They could lie, try to cover up the truth, maintain the secret, or they could trust that the other species would understand the threat and join the fight. Open a channel to the Galactic Council, he ordered. Full spectrum broadcast. Everyone needs to hear this. Director Athex appeared on the screen within moments, her scales shifting through colors Marcus had never seen before. Behind her, representatives from dozens of species crowded to see the transmission. Captain Rivera, the director began. You've activated technology that our sensors say shouldn't exist. The energy signatures match theoretical models for dimensional manipulation that we believed were impossible. Explain. Now. Marcus took a breath and began. He told them everything. The messages from the future, the nature of the devourers, the purpose of the installations. He shared the holographic records, the mathematical proofs, the evidence that was undeniable, even if it was unbelievable. He held nothing back, even the parts that made humanity look suspicious or dangerous. When he finished, the council chamber was silent. Then, unexpectedly, the Vorthon scientist who had been most skeptical spoke up. If this is true, they clicked. then humanity has saved us all. Not just now, but across all of time. The paradox is elegant. Horrifying, but elegant. It's more than that, Dr. Yerix added. She'd been analyzing the data throughout Marcus's presentation. The technology in these installations, it's not just human. I'm detecting design elements from Zalari engineering, Korthax power systems, even Vorthan quantum processors. Technologies that haven't been invented yet, from species working together in ways we never have before. The implications sank in slowly. The installations weren't just humanity's creation. They were the product of a future where all species had united against a common threat, where the boundaries between civilizations had dissolved in the face of annihilation. Director Athex's scales settled into a deep blue, the color of resolve. Captain Rivera, the Galactic Council formally requests humanity's leadership in organizing the Temporal Defense Initiative. If we're going to fight a war across time itself, we need someone who understands both the military and temporal aspects of the conflict. Marcus felt the weight of history, past and future, settling on his shoulders. He looked at his crew, human and alien alike, and saw the same determination in all of them. They'd come together by chance, but they were now bound by purpose. We accept, he said. But this isn't humanity's initiative. It belongs to all of us. Every species, every world that wants to survive what's coming. We'll share everything. The technology, the knowledge, the responsibility. The elder Marcus hologram smiled. This is how it starts. How it started. How it will start. The grammar gets complicated, but the mission is simple. Hold the line. Protect the timeline. Keep the devourers contained until the future can create the past that saves the present. Over the next hours, ships began arriving at the installation. Scientists, military advisors, engineers from every major civilization. The Europa breach remained contained, the defensive grid holding strong, but everyone understood it was just the beginning. Marcus stood in the command center, watching the alliance form in real time. Species that had been enemies were sharing their most guarded secrets. Civilizations that had never interacted were finding common ground in the face of an existential threat. Torres approached with a report. Captain, we've received something interesting. A message from Earth, from the site of the original Operation Nightfall. She handed him the tablet. It was a single line of text in Morse code, recently discovered in a sealed bunker that had been classified for 20 years. The circle is complete. The Guardians have risen. The watch begins. Marcus recognized his own handwriting even though he'd never written those words. Somewhere, somewhen, another version of himself had left this message knowing he would find it at exactly this moment. Sir? Torres asked. What are your orders? Marcus looked out at the assembled fleet, at the installation humming with power, at the future they were building to save the past. He thought about the quiet life he'd wanted, the simple cargo runs between colonies. That life was gone now, replaced by something larger, more important, more impossible. We do what humans have always done, he said. We adapt, we survive, and we protect those who can't protect themselves, even if those we're protecting exist in times we'll never see. He turned to address the full assembly, his voice carrying across the command center and through the communications network to every ship, every world that was listening. The Temporal Defense Initiative begins now. We are the guardians of not just our present, but all presents, all futures, all pasts that lead to survival. The Devourers are contained for now, but they're patient. They exist outside time, so they can wait forever. But we're not going to just wait for them. We're going to be ready. The response was immediate. Cheers, clicks, harmonics, and other expressions of agreement from 100 different species. The alliance that would save the galaxy had saved it. Would save it was born. As Marcus began organizing the first joint training exercises, teaching alien commanders the military protocols they would need, he thought about the elder version of himself in the hologram. That man had lived through the war, had seen the devastation the Devourers could cause. He'd sent these messages back as a warning, a preparation, a hope. Now it was Marcus's turn to make sure that future, that past, that present came to pass. The circle of time wrapped around itself, effect becoming cause becoming effect again. It was impossible and necessary, paradoxical and perfect. The watch had begun. The Guardians had risen. And somewhere in the vast web of time, the Devourers waited, pressing against barriers held in place by the will of species that refused to let entropy win. Marcus smiled grimly. He'd wanted a quiet retirement. Instead, he'd gotten the most important job in the history of the galaxy, protecting all of history itself. The cargo hauler turned temporal guardian looked out at the stars, seeing them not as distant lights, but as positions to defend, times to protect, futures to preserve. The war for reality had begun, and humanity, along with every other species willing to stand with them, would hold the line, no matter when that line needed holding.